On paper, the deal looks clean. The airplane flies the same routes it flew in 1979. It carries the same 4 seats, the same strut-braced wing, and the same air-cooled engine the company has been building variations of since the Eisenhower administration. Every regulator signed off. The airworthiness directives are current. The logbooks are spotless. The sticker says $400,000. That number is not a markup. It is not profit padding on a premium product. It is a bill assembled over 4 decades by 3 separate institutional failures, and every single dollar of the gap between what this airplane is worth and what it costs lands directly on you. The gap is $250,000. The airplane did not create it. Have you ever looked at a sticker price and known, not suspected, known, that the number had nothing to do with the product you were buying? Subscribe to Sky Ranch. This is the arithmetic behind that sticker. The Cessna 172 first flew on June 12, 1955. More than 44,000 have been built. No aircraft in history has been produced in greater numbers. The design survived because it worked. Tricycle gear, a high wing, an aluminum structure, and forgiving handling characteristics kept student pilots alive long enough to become real pilots. The engineers who drew this airframe got it right the first time. Cessna kept building it for 70 years, not because they lacked the imagination to replace it, but because nothing in 7 decades of certified aircraft development produced a better answer at any price a working pilot could reach. That is not stagnation. That is an engineering result so durable that the entire certified general aviation industry eventually built its economics around it. In 1956, the first production model left the factory at $8,295. By 1979, a new one, 72N, was $33,950. The airplane had evolved in those 23 years, with the swept tail introduced on the 172A in 1960, a switch from Continental to Lycoming power, improved avionics options, and better interior trim. But the structural architecture stayed what it was. 4 seats, strut-braced high wing, aluminum monocoque fuselage. The same gross weight class, the same certificated useful load. The design that worked in 1956 still worked in 1979, and the price reflected what it actually cost to build it. The 2024 price does not. Adjusted for general inflation, the 1979 Cessna 172 costs between $145,000 and $150,000 in 2024 dollars. A new 2024 Cessna 172S starts at $400,000. The G1000 NXY glass cockpit version opens at $424,900. A fully equipped model crosses $500,000. The airframe is structurally the same one Cessna certified in the 1960s. The engine is a Lycoming, the same 4-cylinder, air-cooled, horizontally opposed family that powered the airplane before most of its current buyers were born. Certificated useful load is essentially identical to the 1979 version. The gap between what inflation says this airplane costs and what Cessna charges for it is approximately $250,000. That $250,000 did not build a better airplane. The aviation establishment calls this the cost of a modern certified aircraft. Every mechanic who has cracked open these engines, read these logs, and watched owners walk out of annual inspections with bills that exceed what they paid for the airframe calls it something else. It is a bill. An institutional bill. Transferred silently into a purchase price that looks like aircraft value and is not. 3 line items built it. Not one of them appears on the invoice. Not one of them made the airplane safer, faster, or more capable. The first line item arrived in the 1960s and compounded for 30 years before anyone ran the numbers. The FAA certifies general aviation aircraft under a regulation called Part 23. It governs any aircraft under 19,000 pounds with 19 or fewer seats. That classification puts a basic flight training Cessna 172 and a high-performance corporate turboprop under an identical compliance framework. When software entered cockpits in the 1990s, the FAA required every line of avionics code to pass DO 178 compliance validation. The standard applied equally to an attitude indicator going into a skylane as to a full flight management system going into a business jet. The FAA wrote that rule for jets. The rule applied to trainers. Certifying a single avionics product to the full Part 23 fleet costs up to $20 million. Certifying the same product to LSA consensus standards under ASTM costs approximately $2 million. The difference is $18 million in compliance paperwork, transferred directly into the panel price of every certified aircraft that carries the result. The type certificate for a new clean sheet certified general aviation aircraft costs approximately $25 million. Certifying an equivalent aircraft to ASTM standards costs approximately $250,000, 100 times more to certify, not 100 times safer to fly. An FAA-approved angle of attack indicator, the instrument that tells a pilot when the wing is about to stop flying, costs $8,000 in the certified market. The equivalent uncertified unit costs $800. Same function, same components. The $7,200 difference is compliance overhead that has no bearing on whether the instrument works. Every instrument in the panel you are sitting behind carries a version of that invoice. The buyer receives no itemized statement. The certification overhead folds into the purchase price as the cost of the airplane. The airplane did not create that cost. The regulatory architecture applied to it did. The market below the certified wall ran a live experiment on what that overhead actually cost. When the FAA created the light sport aircraft category in 2004 and moved certification to ASTM consensus standards, 126 new LSA designs reached the market in 7 years. Van's aircraft RV series, experimental and not certified under Part 23, has put more than 11,000 flying aircraft into the air worldwide. 1.5 new RVs complete their first flight every day. The demand for affordable aircraft never disappeared. The certified wall redirected it. That is the first line item, $25 million per type certificate and up to $20 million per avionics product, spread across a shrinking production run, billed to whoever buys the airplane at the end of the line. Certification overhead alone does not explain the full $250,000 GAP. The second line item required a national catastrophe to generate. By 1976, the general aviation industry was paying approximately $24 million industry-wide in product liability premiums. A decade later, that figure had reached $210 million, an 875% increase in 9 years. Per aircraft, the numbers were worse. In 1962, liability insurance cost manufacturers approximately $51 per plane delivered. By 1985, it had climbed to $70,000 per airplane. In 1985 and 1986, aviation products liability premiums increased 6 times in 12 months. One major manufacturer's annual premium went from $12 million to over $70 million. Lloyd's of London exited the general aviation liability market during this period. Their public statement was precise: they were prepared to insure the risks of aviation, but not the risks of the American legal system. When an insurance underwriter with 100 years of experience pricing catastrophic risk decides the exposure has crossed from calculable to irrational, the exposure has crossed that line. Between 1983 and 1986, Beechcraft defended 203 product liability lawsuits at an average defense cost of $530,000 per case. NTSB investigated every underlying accident. 0 manufacturing or design defects across all 203 cases. Every accident was traced to pilot error or indirect fault. Beechcraft spent approximately $107 million defending accidents it did not cause. Cessna posted its first annual loss in 1983. On May 28, 1986, Chairman Russell W. Meyer Jr. issued a public statement. This is the sixth consecutive year of severely depressed piston sales. Cessna cannot sustain the financial losses from such low production rates. Cessna halted all single-engine piston production that year. Piper Aircraft filed for bankruptcy in 1991. The world's largest and second-largest producers of single-engine aircraft both stopped building. The Cessna 152, the Piper Tomahawk. The Beech Skipper, the three primary trainers that had put a generation of working pilots in the air, were all gone from production by the mid-1980s. None of them have come back. From 1978 to 1994, unit aircraft sales fell 95%. In 1978, American factories delivered 17,811 general aviation aircraft. In 1994, the year Congress finally acted, that number was 929. Senator Nancy Kassebaum of Kansas shepherded the General Aviation Revitalization Act through Congress. Russell Meyer had promised Cessna would restart production if it passed. President Clinton signed it on August 17, 1994. Cessna restarted. GARA fixed the liability clock. It did nothing else. The certification overhead stayed untouched. The parts pricing structure stayed intact. The competitive certified market that a functioning industry demand would have rebuilt never recovered because the companies that would have driven that recovery went bankrupt in the 1980s, and the ones that survived faced the same $25 million entry costs they always had. Which raises the only question that matters: if the liability crisis is over, why is the airplane still $400,000? That answer lives in the third line item, the one that compounds too slowly to generate a headline. Cessna spent 7 years trying to answer that question itself. In 2007, standing before a crowd at EAA AirVenture, Cessna Chief Executive Officer Jack Pelton announced a clean-sheet, two-seat light sport trainer. The announced price was $109,500. The crowd responded with 720 orders by Friday afternoon. Cessna claimed more than 1,000 orders within a year. The demand was real. To control costs, Cessna built the aircraft in China, through Shenyang Aircraft Corporation. The engineering work continued through 2 prototype crashes during spin testing, each requiring mandatory design changes. First deliveries arrived in 2010, 3 years late. By November 2011, the price had climbed to $149,000. The market walked away. Cessna built approximately 275 Skycatchers before Chief Executive Officer Scott Ernest stood at the National Business Aviation Association in late 2013 and stated the aircraft had no future. Production ended. The world's largest producer of general aviation aircraft could not build a $100,000 trainer using Chinese manufacturing costs with a clean sheet design that started with price as the primary constraint. This is what the certified wall looks like from inside the industry that built it. Which part of that failure surprises you more? That Cessna could not escape its own cost structure, or that nobody in the aviation press ran the arithmetic on what that means for every buyer today? The absence of certified competition is why the third line item keeps running. With no affordable certified alternative in the market, original equipment manufacturers set parts prices without constraint. The Lycoming O360 in the 1979 Cessna 172 and the IO360 in the 2024 model are the same engine family. Air-cooled, 4-cylinder, horizontally opposed. The engineering is essentially unchanged. A factory overhaul today runs approximately $58,000 plus core. A factory new IO360 runs approximately $105,000. In 1982, a comparable engine conversion kit for a 4-cylinder Cessna cost under $50,000 all in. By 2025, the equivalent parts kit had climbed to $123,000. The engine price nearly tripled. The design stayed the same. Parts carrying the same engineering, the same certification, and the same function as the day they were manufactured 4 decades ago are repriced annually by a manufacturer with no competition to check the rate. 4 decades of parts price increases compounding at approximately 5% annually, unchecked, arrive in every annual inspection bill. None of that overhead built a better engine. You are paying the arithmetic of an uncontested market, not the value of a superior part. That is what $250,000 of institutional overhead looks like inside a panel, under a cowl, and on an annual invoice. There is something worth naming before the mechanic's verdict. In 1970, a farmer with $5,000 and a desire to fly could actually do it. Flight schools ran two-seaters at prices a working wage reached without a financing plan. A mechanic in Wichita could own a four-seat Cessna and fly his family to a grass strip 2 states over on a long weekend. A teacher could build flight hours on weekends without a second income. None of that required wealth. It required a functional market, one that priced the aircraft against what working people could spend, not against what a certification architecture demanded they pay. General aviation at its peak was not a hobby for the financially comfortable. It was practical transportation maintained by ordinary people who understood the machines and could reach them economically. That version of the sky closed gradually between 1979 and now. The 3 primary trainers went first. The affordable certified airframe followed. The pilot pipeline that depends on rental rates. Those airframes once set, contracted behind it. 357,000 active private pilot certificates in 1980. 174,155 in 2024, 51% below the 1980 peak, 45 years later. The people who built these systems did not intend this outcome. The FAA wrote Part 23 to ensure safety. Congress created the liability framework that produced the crisis. The OEMs priced their parts against the market available to them. Each decision was individually defensible. The aggregate cost of all of it landing on the same fleet, billed to the same buyers across the same decades, that is, the $250,000 gap. The mechanic's verdict is this. Parts manufacturer approval, known as PMA, parts carry the identical FAA safety certification as OEM parts. The OEM knows this. When PMA competition entered the certified market in the 1990s, one manufacturer running a parts monopoly immediately marked a $3,600 brake component to $800. The certification wall is baked into the sticker price. The annual parts markup is not baked into anything except the assumption that the buyer does not know an alternative exists. Smart mechanics have used PMA parts for 30 years. Every pilot who learns that a $3,600 brake is also available at $800 with the same FAA approval has recovered a portion of the overhead. The system charged them. A 1978 Cessna 172 with a fresh engine overhaul sells today for approximately $85,000. That buyer is not compromising. That buyer read the arithmetic, understood what the $400,000 sticker costs and what it actually buys, and made the rational call. The $250,000 hole is real. The invoice is institutional. The airplane did not build it. Is that gap a design failure, a legal failure, or a regulatory failure? One answer. Leave it in the comments. If Sky Ranch is where you come to see the numbers the industry does not publish, subscribe.